Self-awareness is a prerequisite to integrity, especially for young men. It is the gateway for us as young men to get to know ourselves. I'm not exactly sure why I'm referencing myself with young men. I'm speaking directly and directing my address to young men, and I'm speaking as if I am a young man as well. I'm not a young man, but it seems like I have a specific intention to reach young men, and so I'm including myself in that context. But yes, self-awareness is a prerequisite to integrity. I would say it is the gateway for young men to know themselves really well. In fact, I would say for most of us in society, we feel like we know ourselves well, like really well. The reality is we don't know ourselves well enough. We've never had the opportunity to actually get to know ourselves well enough to ask the questions about what makes us who we are and why are we the way we are? Why do we respond this way in certain scenarios? Why do we do this over a span of time? And why do we find this more compelling over other options that we may never have even considered? But why self-awareness is critical prerequisite for the pursuit of integrity is because it involves so much awareness in what's going on inside of us. And I don't think this is something that we have been brought up being aware of or familiar about. What does it mean to know your values and beliefs? Why are they them? We're going to talk a little bit about those values and principles that we cling to. We'll address some things about the biases that we carry, the awareness that we have of our strengths and our weakness. But stay tuned to the end of this conversation, because I want to share with you one of what I find to be the most powerful prerequisites, especially in the category of self-awareness, that enables us to pursue our integrity well. Without self-awareness, we're really not aware very much about the impact that we have on others. And further, it's a sad observation that we're kept from personally growing as individuals. So stay tuned. Let's embark on some of these characteristics of what it means to be self-aware and why it is the gateway for especially young men to have access to knowing themselves a lot better. Self-awareness helps to identify, firstly, how we understand our own values and our principles. These are like the core beliefs that shape the way that we behave and also determine a lot about our decision-making process. Knowing these core beliefs to ourselves helps to make some sound decisions, and especially when the going gets tough, especially when scenarios are really challenging and difficult, having access or knowing what your core beliefs, having done that internal self-assessment to know what really matters to me, this really helps to bypass a lot of the indecision at the points of when we need to make decisions. Knowing these core beliefs, for example, let's say honesty is one of your core beliefs, then when challenging circumstances come up where it is a really difficult choice to be honest, you are able to jump right to what needs to be done because you have a commitment to your values that knowing that this is one of the ones that you just don't want to default on or break. And so you just even choose to be honest and transparent in the midst of challenging decisions that need to be made. Whereas the alternative is you may default and say, maybe I'll just skimp out on this one here and not be honest because the circumstances are as challenging as they are. These maintain a sense of integrity because it helps us to keep in line with these principles that we subscribe to. By being self-aware, young men, I was supposed to say us as young men, but young men can easily identify the inconsistencies, especially between their values and their actions. A huge component of defining integrity at the very heart of it is that consistency in aligning one's core beliefs with the ways that they behave from those core beliefs, having those align. And for many, they just don't align. And so when you have self-awareness, when you know what your values are, when you know what your beliefs, your principles, your convictions are, then you can easily identify the inconsistencies in your behavior where you believe something, but you do something totally different. And being self-aware helps you to see that gap between your beliefs and your actions. And then it helps you to make some alignments and changes in your patterns of behavior so you can bring realignment back into play. And that doesn't happen unless you have access to self-awareness. And so self-awareness helps one to identify and understand their personal values and their principles. And not knowing this leads to a lot of inconsistency. It leads to a lot of disalignment. Is that a word? Disalignment? Anyway, it leads to a lot of just not matching up with what you really want to be and knowing what really matters to you in the first place. And that takes a lot of work to actually get to know what are your commitments? What are the things that really matter to you belief-wise, that you're like, this is something you never do. You never rattle on someone, or you never do X, Y, and Z. Why is it that you have those values? Self-awareness really helps with that. Self-awareness, secondly, helps one to identify their biases. Biases, let me see if I can give a brief definition of what biases are. Biases basically are preconceived ideas, notions, or attitudes towards certain individuals or groups or situations, whereby they usually lead to unfair or discriminatory behaviors against said group, individual, or situation. Now, it's important to note, I believe that we all have biases. It's not possible for a person to come to the table saying, I've got no biases. The fact is, we all have biases that are encoded because of our development and our growth and our upbringing. There's certain values that have been instilled. There are certain things that have been discouraged. And so based on how we evolve over time, we have encoded biases of various sorts. And so I think we all have biases. It's just an honest thing to acknowledge that we all do have biases. And having all biases, it's crucial that we be aware of them so that we can try to at least acknowledge them and even overcome them. Being self-aware helps in this process of recognizing our biases and becoming more mindful in our thoughts and actions in the ways that we're engaging. It helps us to identify not only the biases, but also as we're considering and acknowledging the biases that are there, it enables us to also consider what are some objective judgments or options we can consider even more to get away from prejudicial conclusions. Unchecked biases leads to discriminatory behaviors and engagements, and even exclusion can be included as an outcome of those who let their biases run unchecked. Self-awareness enables us to have a lot more awareness of what our biases are, to be able to acknowledge them, to be able to consider what alternatives are that are more fair, more balanced. And it also helps us to, in knowing and acknowledging and understanding what our biases are, it enables us to even move forward to be able to start diminishing the effect of the expression of those biases. Thirdly, self-assessment also enables us to have access to personal growth, especially for young men who are considering, how can I get to be a better version of myself? This commitment to self-awareness as one pursues their integrity enables personal growth to be far more accessible. It's so good to understand what areas you can grow in. It's helpful to distinguish where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. And this does not happen without the aid and assistance of self-awareness. When young men know what their strengths are, they can use those strengths to maximize their potential. So if you have a particular strength and you're aware of it, you can say, how can I use this now to help move me forward in growing to the next better version of myself? How can I use my strengths, say, with working out at the gym to help physically in some areas by volunteering perhaps, or by using that to excel in some opportunities where your physical strength can be maximized. For others, if it's more along the lines of thinking, or if it's more along the lines of mechanically putting things together and taking them apart, if that's what your strength is, how can I utilize those strengths to enable me to move forward? Being aware of your strengths really helps you know what your options are for growing and taking advantage of opportunities that come your way. But knowing your weaknesses as well is also critical in the area of personal growth. And this does not happen without self-awareness. When you're aware of what your weaknesses are, it can become a powerful motivator for you to start working on what self-improvement for yourself looks like. If you don't know where your weaknesses are, if you are actively putting your head in the sand and saying, I want to remain oblivious, I want to remain ignorant on this, you don't have any trajectory that continues to enhance and help you to become a better version of you. And so being aware of your weaknesses is really an important part of what is involved in pursuing personal growth. Now, may I say that being open to be aware of your weaknesses, while perceived as a weak thing and unnecessary for many, it's actually a real expression of courage. And I talked yesterday, I'll put a little card up here somewhere, here or here. I'll put a little card up somewhere about that conversation we had on courage, which is another prerequisite of integrity, is being courageous. But it is a courageous thing for one to own where their weaknesses are. It takes courage and integrity not only to recognize your weakness, but also to improve. It takes integrity to be aware that you have weaknesses. That's being honest about it. And then it takes courage to actually start working on those weaknesses, saying, how can I face those things that I'm not really good at? How can I face the things that I'm really uncomfortable about working on? And for all of us, I would say personal growth is in one of those areas of how can we continue to be aware of our weaknesses and continue to increase that trajectory of our personal growth in the upwards pathway so that we can continue to grow. And this takes courage. This takes courage to face ourselves and say, what do I need to work on myself? Where are areas that I need to be addressing so that I can continue to grow and move and shift and change? Because the reality is we're all changing over time. We're not stagnant. We don't stay like at this equilibrium. We're either progressing or we're regressing. And if you're not progressing, if you're not intentionally choosing the pathway that says, how can I grow? How can I face my weaknesses, address them, and overcome them one at a time? If we're not doing that actively and intentionally, what really is happening is we're regressing. We're growing in a trajectory that doesn't enhance who we are or who we could be. And that's a concern. So knowing your weakness is another aspect of personal growth in the self-awareness branch that we are climbing right now. And knowing our strengths and weaknesses, by knowing these, young men, you can really build that sense of self-confidence that enables you to face yourself with a sense of authenticity that says, I'm being who I am and who I was made to be, and this is a good thing. And I'm here on purpose. I've got a plan. I've got an agenda. I've got intentions that I want to see fulfilled. I want to see myself in a different place, maybe a week from now, maybe a month from now, let's say 5-6 months from now, and a year. Here's where I want to be. You start having this sense of progression that really enables you to step into that power of who you are, and you're able to have, again, that self-confidence to face the world. And let's face it, young man, for many of you, and I know what this is like because I once was there. I once was in this space. When we don't have confidence, when we don't have the sense of self-confidence, when we don't have the self-awareness to know what are our strengths and our weaknesses, what does it look like for me to grow personally? How can I be aware that I haven't experienced personal growth for a very long time? How can we use that as a catalyst to propel ourselves into this trajectory where we see that arc of personally growing increase just by starting off with a desire that says, I want to change, I want to grow. And don't forget, I've got like the last point here still coming up in a couple of points that really is going to help in this department. I'm looking forward to getting to that. But if you've not already done so, if you are resonating with what I'm saying, especially in this moment of saying, it's been a while, young man, since you've experienced what it means for you to personally grow. If it's been a while since you have had a reflection of what does it take for me to know myself a little bit better, especially by way of not only my strengths, but looking myself in the mirror and considering what are the areas that I need to grow in personally? Where are my weaknesses? Do I even know what they are? If it's been a while since you've even been thinking in this way, may I suggest today is a grand day for it. Carve out some time today, even in this moment, if you're able to just do some self-reflection and say, what is it to be me? Where am I at? What makes me me? What do I do really well? And the courageous part of this, which it may not be easy, how can I actually be aware of the areas that I'm not doing so hot in? So many young men are insecure. And I'm not sure if you're one of them, but it takes some massive courage to be able to say, I'm actually willing to look at myself in the areas where I still have deficits, in the areas where I still need to work on myself. I recognize, for some of you might say, I recognize that I have an anger problem. I recognize that I gossip. I recognize that I have narcissistic tendencies. I recognize that I don't deal well with conflict and I tend to avoid it and run away from it. Like, what does it look like to acknowledge first these weaknesses and then to start addressing them and saying, I'm going to look for some help in how to attend to this. Young men, self-awareness also helps you to understand the impact of your behaviors, your actions on those around you. This doesn't happen unless you are intentionally pursuing self-awareness. It allows you to make informed decisions that aligns with your actions and the values that you subscribe to, while also balancing being aware and mindful of those around you. When you're self-aware, you're aware of what your values are, you're aware of what your convictions, your core beliefs are, and you can still execute and operate off of those while being aware of how to do so tactfully in the way that you impact those around you. This is going to affect the way you say things while staying true to yourself and true to your values. You're still able to say what needs to be said to those around you. And so it increases this aspect of being empathetic. It enables you to become stronger in those relationships that you hold because you're aware of the impact of your actions on others around you. That's a really important part. Finally, we've gotten to the one that I love the most, that I wanted to talk about, that I was referencing earlier. And in fact, I've actually mentioned it a couple times along the way here. Mentioned it a couple times. But this is a really critical one, and I'm super enthusiastic about this one because, one, I would say so many of us young men, again, here I am, including myself amongst the young men, even though I'm not a young man, but so many of us young men also do not have an awareness of ourselves, especially in the category of being mindful. Self-awareness enables young men to increase and become more mindful. What do I mean when I say being mindful? One way to say it is, how can you be present in the moment? How can you be attentive to your thoughts and feelings? How can you be aware of what's going on in this moment in yourself? For me, it happens on an ongoing basis when people ask me, how are you doing? And instead of giving the typical response of, I'm good, I endeavor, and I think I do this most of the time. Most of the time, I do an internal check and I say, where am I at? Like, this is a question they're asking me, how am I doing? I'm like, how am I doing? Where am I at right now? Oh, I'm actually doing really good because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Or actually today's a really rough day and here's kind of a little bit of what's going on. Thank you for asking, kind of thing. That's me endeavoring to be mindful about where I'm at. So I'm trying to be present in the moment. I'm trying to be attentive to what feelings I have, what emotions and thoughts are percolating in my mind and my heart. How am I existing in this space currently is what kind of goes a little bit into this. And this is a tough thing for many young men because we've not been taught how to be mindful. When we're asked, hey, how are you feeling? It's a really difficult thing to do that internal check because you haven't worked those muscles of reflection, self-reflection, self-awareness. And so you're like, I don't know, like, how do I answer that kind of thing? You know, like I don't know how to even engage that question. So it helps young men become more aware of what's going on in the moment, in themselves. And with this ability to be mindful, where young men are able to make decisions that align more with their goals and their values and their beliefs, because they're able to know, here's what's going on and here's how I'm able to respond to the opportunities and the situations and the scenarios that I find myself in. It's less likely when you are mindful that you're going to be impulsive in the ways that you make decisions in your life, because you're able to think through them a lot more carefully. If you're not practicing being mindful, you just don't know how to respond because you haven't actually brought that alignment internally that enables you to know your values and your beliefs. And so only by being mindful can you cultivate this greater sense of self-awareness that enables you to make decisions in those split moments. For example, if someone were to ask me to do something that I really don't feel like doing, once upon a time when I didn't practice self-awareness, I'd respond kind of like, I guess I should, and there'd be a sense of obligation, even though my answer would be a no. I would still do it, and it just didn't align with who and what I wanted to be in that moment. So it's less likely for you to make impulsive decisions as a result of having this access to being mindful. It helps also to manage your stress and anxiety. So many young men, you experience such extreme levels of stress and anxiety and worry and concern, and you've never really been taught how to address it or how to deal with it. And this practice of mindfulness, of being present in the moment, of being aware, of taking an internal temperature of where you're at and being able to read that and being aware of it, this really helps in the category of managing your stress and anxiety so that it becomes manageable. And then it also further helps with improving one's ability to focus and to concentrate. Really it just enhances like so many aspects of one's well-being altogether. This practice of mindfulness, it's a really critical one. And if you haven't already started practicing, like there's plenty of videos I'm sure here on YouTube that you can check out. I'm not sure, I might do a video at some point in the future on this theme. Perhaps let me know in the comments if you think that would be helpful, but I really feel strongly about this. I know in the 12-step group that I attend regularly, one of the things we do is what we call a feelings check, and that's like a mindful practice. So we begin our meetings by way of saying, let's do a feelings check, and so we'll just go around the room and everyone will just kind of give a 2 or 3 word response, feelings wise, of today I'm feeling sad and frustrated and discouraged, for example, or I'm feeling happy and encouraged and optimistic, or whatever it looks like. That's a form of being mindful. And I share that just as a way maybe to make it more accessible to you if you've never done this. What does it look like? If I were to sit across the table from you, we're having coffee, and I asked you, let's do a feelings check here. That would be a mindful practice where you could just do an internal, let me think through, what am I feeling? I'm feeling confused. I'm feeling uncertain. I'm feeling inadequate. You know, those are some references that you could point out as you become more aware of what's happening in here and what's happening in here. So that's a really critical component of one practicing what self-awareness looks like. So dear friends, dear young men, as I address you today on this theme of becoming more self-aware, I address it because I don't think there's much of self-awareness going on out there. In fact, I actually don't even think there's much of integrity that's going on out there, or the pursuit of integrity. We might have ideas of what integrity are like, but rarely do we commit our lives to walking and pursuing integrity, walking with and pursuing integrity. And young men, I want to address you specifically because I think there is a gold mine for you in your experience of life, in your growing into the stature of being men of integrity. What could be? That's what I want to describe to you. That's why I want to spell out all of these themes relating to integrity. It's my call to you, young men, to say, will you join me in becoming men of integrity? Will you commit yourselves at this young age, wherever you find yourself, from teenagers right up to your 20s and even 30s? Would you commit yourself? It's not too late. Would you commit yourself to pursuing integrity? Is there that desire for you to become something more of what you could be instead of settling for where you presently are? Is there some way that you can address the confusing experience you've come to have in life so far, and you're just hoping that there is something that can come along the way that can give you a model of what could be in walking in this path of integrity, so that you're able to have far more happier experiences in life, far more better commitments in the way that you engage? Is there a way that you are resonating with any of this? This is why I'm putting these conversations together. This is why I'm honing in and focusing on this theme of integrity and what it entails. And I'm going to be carrying on with a series here for a few more episodes on some of the prerequisites of integrity. Check out yesterday's video. I'm going to put a little drop thing over on this side on that conversation on courage and how that is a prerequisite for integrity. But today, consider this call, especially to pursuing intentionally, being self-aware, being men who are self-aware as they progress towards being men of integrity. I hope I'm encouraging and inspiring you towards this destination. If you haven't already done so, let me encourage you to like this video, because that helps get this message out to more men who are needing to hear this. If you found this really helpful and you can think of some men in your life who could benefit from this, I would love for you to forward this video on to them and allow me to connect with them through this conversation and engage and endeavor to inspire them to what could be by way of living with integrity, especially as one grows through this prerequisite of self-awareness. If you've not already done so, I would love for you to join my community that I'm building here. I'm doing this intentionally on purpose. I want to gain influence with you so I can encourage you and inspire you towards more integrity. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. I would love that. And I would be ecstatic if you left me a comment down below, because that continues the conversation. The conversation is a two-way street. Here's me talking to you. Here's me sharing my ideas. But I'd love to hear from you. What's your response on all this? How are you receiving this? How was it carried over? How was it on the receiving end? Did I miss some things that could have been helpful? Are there some epiphanies or some breakthroughs or aha moments that you had as you were listening to this conversation on what these elements are? But self-awareness, goodness, it helps you to know what your values are. It helps you to understand and acknowledge your biases and how not to express them. It helps you, especially in this area of personal growth, and how to be aware of how your actions impact those around you. And of course, to practice this discipline of being mindful. These are some magnificent nuggets, and I would love for you to experience these in greater amounts in your experience in life. But it doesn't happen when you just sit and say, that was a great conversation. It happens when you take these on and start implementing these things in your life. So don't let this go by the wayside where you're like, oh, that was great. What does this mean for you? And how are you engaging and embarking on your journey towards integrity? Dear friends, thank you for spending the time. It's been just under half an hour here of talking on this theme, but it's really powerful stuff, I believe. Powerful stuff that has the ability to shift and transform what could be to something more. I hope you'll take that up today. Again, let me know if I can be of service in encouraging you from the sidelines. That's why I'm here. I would love to hear from you. Drop me a comment down below. Subscribe. I will see you in the next video. Chat soon.